Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Jane Wong is the author of Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City, a memoir. Jane Wong's debut memoir, Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City, is out now from Tin House. She is also the author of 2 poetry collections, How Not to Be Afraid of Everything and Over Poor. A restaurant baby, she grew up in a Chinese-American takeout restaurant on the Jersey Shore and is an associate professor at Western Washington University, where she teaches creative writing and Asian American literature. She is also an interdisciplinary artist, and her most recent exhibition was Nourish at the Richmond Art Gallery in 2022. Welcome, Jane. Thanks so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City.
Thanks, Zibby. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, okay. Can you tell listeners a little bit about your memoir and even why you decided to write a memoir to begin with?
That's a great question. Oh, goodness. I'm a poet, kind of, I guess, like, I don't know, in my deepest heart, I suppose. And so writing memoir was pretty scary for me, moving into nonfiction, because you can't hide behind a metaphor, I suppose. So the book kind of began as kind of an extension of my poems. I think a little bit of the stories that are hidden within them and kind of really fleshed out and given more breath, given more space to roam. And I guess how I would try to describe like what the memoir is a bit of a love song, I suppose, to my mother, for sure, but also what it means to kind of grow up, low income, working class, Chinese American immigrant baby and trying to make do with what you have. And certainly the story kind of starts with my father's gambling addiction and the time he spent in Atlantic City, which I just spent time in Atlantic City this past week. It was my first time going back in over 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
It's really emotional and kind of what happens to our family as a result of really this desire to kind of make something of someone's life, the American dream, all of that coming crashing down and rebuilding and resilience. And what happens to, I guess, adult me too. I definitely didn't want this to be a book that was just situated in a very specific moment in time, but rather thinking about the past, the present, and the future, because I do take some risks in memoir, such as creating a character who kind of exists in the future space. Her name is wongmom.com. But yeah, there's a lot in this book, but its central core, really, truly, it's a love song to my mom, which everything is, I guess, that I write. So
oh.
Hey.
Well, you really write in such a gripping way. I mean, and it's no surprise that you're a poet because the way that you write each sentence even is just so beautiful. And the length of the sentence, like the construction of them, like it's all clearly very thought out. And I don't know, it was great. I read a lot of memoir. And this was particularly on a sentence level, just like so done. I can't even make a sentence today. So there you go, as contrast. But what struck me, right away is you as a young girl, just so sad, really, and watching your mom and trying to like understand that what is happening is perhaps not what is supposed to be happening. That you're not supposed to have your dad go for benders for days on end and have your mom just be on the beach with you and being like, oh, I don't know where he is. And trying to like having to pull him out and then him just disappearing basically from your life for so long and having to come to terms with that. And you obviously go into your feelings, but it's not something that can be just like put aside lightly. Right. Which is probably why you're still revisiting it now and going, all of that. So tell me a little bit more about the sort of lingering effect of your even your dad's relationship. And I know it's a love letter to your mom, but, by
Right.
contrast.
Yeah, I think, it's really interesting in thinking about, my mother as my everything, in my life. And I just recently spent a lot of time at home, and I'm back in Seattle now, but to be in her garden space and to see all those vegetables just like thriving and growing, and what we can make out of something that I suppose was so difficult. She was arranged to marry my father. He was a stranger to her. And it was kind of her, ticket out of, the rural countryside in China and out of poverty, really. And so when she came to this country, my father was this figure of like potential hope, And what occurred, obviously, was estrangement and a lot of other, really difficult things that she tried to shield me from, I think, as a young child. And so, in many ways, I think my father becomes this character because in many ways I don't know him. I haven't had him in my life since I was a small child. And so what was really difficult, I think, in writing the memoir was to be, honest and true and real about the damage that he's done to our family and what it means, what estrangement means, right, to a small child, but also to an entire family unit. In terms of my own relationships later in life, there's a stream of terrible ex-boyfriends in this memoir. I was so worried about people being like, oh, she has daddy issues, right? Which is so messed up in terms of being such a gendered idea, and thinking about, familial trauma. But yet, so I actually write about it directly because I was so afraid that people were going to just dismiss me as that, when in fact it's so much more complicated than that. But I think that my father becomes this almost like larger than life character because he isn't in my life. And so again, the hardest thing was to be true and real about the kind of domino effect of what happened when he left our family, but also create a lot of empathy for him and a lot of forgiveness and a lot of care. At the end of the opening chapter, I do imagine strolling with him on the boardwalk when he's in his 90s and hoping for that reconciliation. And I think that's like what I can do. I think even though he's not in my life as a daughter, that I still hold a lot of affection for him and care and hope for him and what life he's had for himself. So it's an emotional ride. I will tell you that this memoir was incredibly vulnerable to write. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this, I might as well give all of myself to it, mostly because I don't know. I don't know if I have another one in me. It's like what I'm trying to say. Like it kind of took so much out of me, but also it gave so much back to me by the time I finished writing this. And, to record the audiobook, for instance, was so powerful since my mom can listen to it. And it feels really special. This is the first book she's read of mine, even though I've had, two collections of poetry before. But I think there's something about writing in prose that I think offers a bit more, I don't know, like it's a little more accessible in some ways in terms of like storytelling, a little more direct. And even though, thank you for your kind words about the lyricism on the sentence level. And I will say that I so badly wanted to write every sentence with meter and like a certain rhythm, and I had to let go of some of it because like you can't sustain it for 300 pages, but I tried my best. But I also loved being back in scene and doing scene work and dialogue. And, even though, this is nonfiction, there's still so much to do in terms of the multifaceted ways we can describe, the characters or the real people in our lives, including myself, which was hard, but to kind of really take a close look at like who I am, who I've grown to be and will be. Again, I feel like there's so much in this book that is written all the way up to the immediate present, to the degree in which I think I wrote up to the minute in my life until I handed my final, notes to my editor, which is a big risk, I think, because memoir sometimes takes place in a certain time in one's life, whereas this one kind of went all the way up to the minute, including my, ex-fiance. So
I did the same thing. I wrote a memoir bookends, and every time it came back for like the final copy edits, I was like, oh, I'm just going to write another little paragraph. Add another thing or two here because this is what's happened since. So yeah.
Right, right. It's like never ending in many ways to kind of
Mhm.
like try to make the constellations, the connections from what's happening at this very moment to all the other kind of moments and scenes and memories that happen in the book as you're writing them. But I certainly feel like it almost feels like whatever, 10 years from now, looking back at this, I wonder what I would think about this version of myself then too, because it's also a time capsule too in some ways as
Yes.
well. So
Well,
yeah.
to your point of you're not sure you can do it again, I feel like once you tell, this is just my 2 cents, but once you
Mhm.
tell that like fundamental thing that like you have to write about, then
Mhm.
subsequent memoirs become, unless there's another life-changing thing that happens, right? That
Mhm.
you're not compelled to write it. Like it has to be something
Mhm.
like your dog, or it's a different lens completely, right? My
Mhm.
relationship with dogs or something. But that's not like a memoir in the same
Mhm.
way as these. I don't know. So I feel like there's always one fundamental memoir per person, like of their whole like root, and then there can be subsequent. You know
Oh,
what I
I
mean?
like that. I like that. The roots and yeah, the kind of tendrils that kind
Yeah,
of spiral out into another sprout. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, tendrils and sprouts. We're on a roll here.
Oh no, the poet, the weird poet. I always do this. I always to always like, talk in these like, strange metaphors and
No,
yeah.
no. Well, you also though taught me a lot because I've been to Atlantic City a couple times
Oh,
actually
wow.
I've stayed at the Revel when it was built.
Mm.
You wrote about that in the book. I actually went there once when I was pregnant and I like, oh my God, don't even ask it. I was like dragged there. So
Oh my
I spent the whole
goodness.
time like reading in my room, which was actually pretty because it was right on the water. So I
Right.
just like sat on the bed and like a beached whale and read my book and that
Oh.
was it. But anyway, it had some good restaurants, I have to say. But anyway, I've been to Atlantic City. I did not know the history of why boardwalks were even boardwalks with the wood
Mm.
planks and how they used to come
Mhm.
off at night and get
Mhm.
stored away. And it was so that taxi drivers and like cars didn't have to get sand in
Yeah.
them from the beach. That's so cool. Like, who thought of that? I mean, I don't know. I never would have known that had I not read your book. So there you go. So I like how you mixed in sort of the rise and fall, if you will, of Atlantic
Mm.
City with your own narrative.
Oh, yes. I feel like that city in particular, and again, I just returned after 20 odd years to Atlantic City, which I will say was such a homecoming. Like it was so generous. I feel like my entire memory or kind of like I don't know, has been like changed a bit as a result of this most recent visit because it was like kind of a reprise, like when we went there, obviously my father was being brought there to kind of like, gamble. We would get like free hotel rooms and it was just kind of this, really predatory act, on the behalf of casinos to target specifically, I feel like low income Asian American families. And so, as a kid, we didn't have much money and my father was going into debt. And so my mom never let me play any boardwalk games. And it was so sad because you imagine like just being a kid and just like walking down the
Wow.
boardwalk and being like, no ice cream for you, no like
Oh,
game. And so, because we just didn't have the money, and my mom was like, we can't waste it on that. We need to, use it for food. And so going back just last week on to the boardwalk, and finally my mom giving me a few dollar
oh,
bills and playing like the claw game and like boardwalk games. It was the cutest thing. And it was one of those moments where like the whole city has changed for me in my mind. It's like now I feel like it's, that, I met so many wonderful people in Atlantic City are trying to really continue the tradition of a lot of the restaurants that are still there and to be so proud to be from a place that's both very gritty but also at the same time like still holds a lot of beauty and the ocean, the ocean's still there. And I think that that's just so special. But yeah, it was a hard memory. I couldn't go into the Caesar's Palace. Like I just stood there and that's the one that my
yep,
father went to the
yep.
most. And they put us up, Mighty Writers, a wonderful organization that supports young writers, invited me out and my mom to Atlantic City, and they put us up in the Tropicana
Oh,
hotel. And to walk through the casino, it was pretty emotional, but it definitely was. we decided, my mom and I decided to play the slot machine just once because we've never gambled. Neither of us have ever gambled before. And just to kind of almost like clear just try. We were trying to really make this our story versus my father's. So anyway, yes, the Rebel, all the history, did a lot of research.
Wait, what happened? Did you win the game?
Oh,
At the
definitely
slots?
not. We
Oh.
didn't even know how to play. It was kind of
Oh my, I was
embarrassing.
waiting for like, and then we hit the jackpot and it was
No,
this perfect full circle moment.
no, we lost $3.
Oh no.
But we couldn't even figure out how to play. Like it was too many lights, too many. We literally were staring at it. It was like, how are people doing this? Like we don't know what to do. And so we just left and, got ice cream or something like that. But it was cute. It was a really powerful return. But I can't believe you stayed at the Rebel. That's
yeah. Twice.
Oh,
Twice. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it's not that far from New York, for an escape. And anyway, too funny. So tell me about the act of actually like sitting down and writing this. Did you cry? Did you like, what was it like? Where did you do it? How long did it take you? Like, give me a mental picture of it.
Yeah, yeah. The book began as essays. Like there are a few singular essays that there are now chapters. I think I began this in 2017, so not too long ago, but a chunk ago. And it really began with Meet Me Tonight in Atlantic City, but also, the cheat sheet for restaurant babies too was kind of an early one as well. And I was writing these kind of singular essays at the time with like this hope of finding a way to braid them later, I suppose. And it was a little intimidating for me, I think, as someone who's coming from a poetry background. And I was realizing, I was like, I have pages, like I have space, I can kind of, put in research. And so for me, it was really a delight to be able to kind of like take my time. You can write a poem in a day. You can write a poem in an hour if you really want to, or maybe 15 minutes, but you certainly can't write an essay or a chapter of a memoir in that short period of time. It's just not doable. So that started kind of there. And when I kind of worked with Tin House on the book later, this was like December of 2021, the only like 90 pages of the book were written. And so I wrote the rest of it really very quickly. And it's funny when I think about how long the like first 90 pages kind of took and then like what happens later is that it was all in my, my head and my heart. Like it was like pouring out of me. It was kind of so visceral. I definitely avoided certain chapters, the harder ones. I saved the hardest ones to write last, and so I feel like I saved the object of love last. Certainly the last chapter too, even writing about writing, that was hard, which is funny because I make all my students write about writing. And so it was definitely definitely a lot of crying, but also a lot of laughing. I probably laughed more than I cried while writing this book because I just wanted to give myself that like joy of some of the goofier moments in the book. There was a lot of phone calls with like my mom, certainly. Sometimes when I was stumped to write like a particular moment or scene, I would just call her and then I would just ask her a very, very broad question, which was, tell me something I don't know. And she would just like be like, oh, this happened to me. And then I would write it into literally whatever I was like stumped on. And so that happened a lot. I ate a lot of snacks while I was writing this book. I feel like I'm the type of writer who has to have like about like 5 different bowls of like snacks when I'm writing. And while I like to think I like to write on a desk or anything, I always write in bed. And so it actually becomes quite messy. I'll be honest, because you're just like, there's Cheez-Its like in my bed. So that's me writing the book. Ultimately, it's like, writing in bed, which is again, not great for my back or anything. But for some reason, I am drawn to this like cozy space. I've tried writing. I sometimes write on a desk, but it's just not my thing. And a lot of the things that happened while writing the book is very immersive. And so, for instance, when I was writing the end of To Love a Mosquito, and I didn't know how to end that particular chapter about my brother, I called him up and I said I love him, and I ended it that way by actually calling him and telling him I love him, which is something I've never said out loud to him, and so it was like sometimes writing the book was like again, like calling my mom, calling my brother was to make it happen. Like there was a lot of immersive writing as well. So, but immersive writing, snacks, research, poetry, all those things. And sometimes a glass of wine. Yes.
The truth comes out. Wine and
Yeah.
Cheez-Its get you to the
Wine
finish
and
line.
Cheez-Its, get with it. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Tell me about the tour you just got back from. Where did you go and what was it like? And were there questions asked that really stumped you? Or was there something you found yourself really loving talking about? Or just tell me what was expected, not expected?
Thanks, Zibby. I feel like
Oh,
it's been kind of a blur. I was a little bit of everywhere, obviously here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Bellingham, where I teach. And I went to the Bay Area, LA, Iowa City, which was kind of a fun but intense return, I guess, back to where I did my MFA at Iowa. And of course, like my New York, New Jersey kind of part of the tour too. I think the most emotional part of the tour was definitely this latter half in, New York City and New Jersey. I had a few readings in Brooklyn and New York City's Chinatown, and again, Atlantic City, Jersey City. And I will say that being in New York City's Chinatown at You and Me Books was really emotional because I used to go to Chinatown all the time as a kid and reading at this beautiful, Asian American owned bookstore. You and Me was like, it was so cozy, and I feel like the whole vibe of that particular reading got really vulnerable immediately. And some of the questions were really, and conversations were about kind of like writing from, archives that are incomplete. And it got deep really quickly. I think that conversation, which was so moving. Obviously, as I mentioned, the Atlantic City visit was like phenomenal. Actually, Mighty Writers, they hosted me and they actually had a youth group who does a lot of traditional Chinese dances, Dynasty Alliance, and a bunch of like young people like did a dragon dance and fan dance. It was so on behalf of the book, and it felt like just such a generous kind of event. But I will say that I have to give a shout out. I think the whole tour, the highlight for sure is having my mom on tour with me for some of it. So she came out to Elliott Bay Bookstore in Seattle, where I live, and she launched with me as one of my conversation partners. And I will say that the end of the reading, I didn't cry the whole reading. I somehow made it through. And at the end, I got emotional because my best friend, Michelle Penulosa, who also hosted me at Elliott Bay, asked the question about labor and work. And the book is also a lot about work, its fundamental core. And I started to cry because I was like, my mom still, works night shift at the USPS. And I was just like, I worry about her all the time, like overworking herself. And so she stops me and she says, like, mommy is strong. Don't forget that. And she literally picks me up, literally physically picks me up and spins me around with her like massive muscles. And she's like, I'm strong. Don't worry about me. And like everybody just started screaming. It was like, it was so emotional. And she's such a ham. She's so funny. And so she was my conversation. So she was on tour with me in Seattle, but also in my Jersey events. So she was there, and she was kind of like a mini, as she should be. Moms are celebrities. So it was very special to have her on stage with me for quite a few events. So that's definitely a highlight for sure.
Wow, that is so special. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The other day I saw this man like on top of a ladder, like trimming this bush or like doing something with the electrical wires. I don't know what was going on, but he was all like hunched over. And I'm like, this is so awful that this is the state of our country, that you have to keep working until the end of your life, essentially. I mean, it's just, anyway, it was one of those moments.
It's really hard because, as somebody, and the book really kind of speaks to a lot of my discomfort with my upward mobility too. I'm a professor, and, there's one chapter, oh my gosh, the name of it, Snow, Gloom, Rain, Pandemic, Gloom of Night. It's just, it's the idea that obviously the Postal Service delivers no matter what. And there's something about like, at the very beginning of lockdown and the pandemic, where I could work from home. I have the privilege to work from home, even though it was difficult, of course, teaching online. But my mom was not. She's an essential worker. She had to go to the facility. And I was so worried about, masking and everything. I somehow got my vaccine before she was eligible to get her vaccine. And it just like all of that. So yes, like I feel a lot of deep feelings about what does it mean to be, the daughter of somebody who's clearly worked so hard and so many physical labor. And yet here I am, feeling so, privileged in what it means to have this education and to be able to write. My mom is the original writer. She's the original poet, because she's a storyteller, right? But because I'm the first in my family to even graduate traditional high school, it's like, who was able to actually be a writer in terms of, language skills and the privilege to kind of have that time to write. I don't know. I think about that a lot. And I think about what it means to kind of follow your creative desires as a working parent. And I know for a fact that she's, now I think making a lot of space for that for her own life, because, her kids are grown and whatnot. And she's now like, all her time is spent in the garden. All her time is like spent hanging out with friends, storytelling. She's a writer, but she's never written. So it's on paper, but she's a storyteller. So I want to really emphasize that I really think that writing is about storytelling at the end of the day. It's all, for me, coming from a family of oral storytellers, like it's to me, yes, I wrote it down on paper, but these are not all my stories, so I think about that a lot. But yeah.
Wow. Well, Jane, congratulations. So exciting. Thank you for sharing those details with me and the listeners and everything. So congratulations, and no pressure to write another one. You go back to doing whatever you love and keep being a poet and all that great stuff. So
thanks,
congrats.
Zibby. That means a lot. Thank you for your generosity and just like sharing a bit about your own kind of, I don't know, journey to, as a writer, but also as a person just like moving through the world. I feel like it's like such a bewildering time, I think. And I feel like if anything, writing or doing anything creative has kept me really grounded in like, I don't know, seeing what's beautiful, even when there's something so terrifying in the world. So I don't know. I will always be writing poems, but I'm dreaming up other things, maybe even a novel. I don't know. I'm always tinkering with things. I also do ceramics, so I'm definitely going to do more of that this year. But yeah, just thank you so much for all your beautiful questions and for reading. And yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
You too. Bye.
Okay. Bye, Jane. Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.